Hey everybody, welcome to Jersey First TV and our candidate forum. Elizabeth Nader with you tonight and my co-host, Jolly Tamorian.
Hi.
Welcome to Jersey First TV and welcome to Assemblyman John Bramnick. Tonight, we are doing a candidate forum for the candidates running for Senate in District 21. So obviously, Assemblyman John Bramnick is running for that seat. We are doing two separate interviews, so you'll be able to see his competitor's interview as well. Both similar in length, both similar number of questions, and the questions have been inspired by the recent gubernatorial debate. So you'll have 2 minutes to give us an opening, about 3 minutes to answer each of the questions, and then we'll have a 2-minute close. Before we get into the opening, Assemblyman, I'll read your bio for everyone, if that's okay.
Sure.
John Bramnick is the Assemblyman for New Jersey's 21st Legislative District, serving parts of Morris, Somerset, and Union counties. Assemblyman Bramnick was elected by his colleagues in November 2015 to serve his third term as the Assembly Minority Leader, making him the highest ranking member of the Republican caucus in the Assembly. He has been a member of the State Assembly since 2003 and is currently running to represent District 21 in the State Senate. Outside of public service, he has taught as an assistant professor of business law at Rider University and an adjunct professor of business law at Rutgers University. Assemblyman Bramnick is also a partner in a law firm in Scotch Plains and is a certified civil trial attorney. He holds a BA from Syracuse University and a JD from Hofstra University School of Law. Okay, so we would like you to begin, Assemblyman, with a 2-minute opening, please, to the audience.
Sure. Thanks for this opportunity. And I'm what they call the old-time moderate Republican. When I first got in the legislature, before all this partisanship and antagonistic behavior, I actually had a resolution back in 2004 and 5 about civility in this state. So I pride myself on, number one, making sure we talk to each other respectfully. 2, last time I ran not only against the Democrats, but also against some Trump Republicans who said I was not enough like Trump. And on the left, they said I was too much like Trump. So I pride myself on the fact that I'm simply representing my district, and the Trump Republicans threatened me that they were going to run against me just so I would lose. And the Democrats said I was like Trump. So I think I'm just where I'm supposed to be, which is in the middle, and deal with issues as they come about, not some partisan approach. That's basically what I do. And I served as the Republican leader in the House for 10 years. I still serve. And because my job is to bring people together, including people who are more conservative than I am and maybe more liberal than I am. So I'm very proud of my record.
Okay, great. Thank you, Assemblyman. Jolly, let's start with you with the first question, please.
Okay, great. So the Republican candidate for governor has said that he supports a woman's right to choose when it comes to abortion, but he doesn't support the Reproductive Freedom Act. Well, the co-sponsor of the Reproductive Freedom Act in a recent interview said that he expects the bill to be pared down to simply codifying a woman's right to choose into state law. As a result of especially as a result of what's happening in like Texas and other states like that. Under what circumstances, if any, would you support this bill?
I'd absolutely support a bill that protects a woman's right to choose. I've been one of 2 or 3 Republicans in the caucus from the beginning. I've never changed my position in terms of the right to choose. I simply say that we should protect and codify Roe versus Wade. I think some of the Democrats had some problems with this actual bill, including I think Steve Sweeney wasn't moving the bill. But absolutely, my record is 100% clear on the right to choose. And I've been attacked by a number of right-to-life groups during my years in the legislature.
Thank you.
Any follow-up, Jolly?
Nope.
Okay.
That's great.
Okay, great. Assemblyman, 1/3 of businesses have closed permanently, sadly, in New Jersey as a result of Murphy's handling of COVID. Over 8,000 seniors we know have perished. Many schools were closed for an extended number of time. Families are hurting, children are hurting, businesses are hurting. What do we need to do now to rectify the mistakes of the last 19 months?
Well, you've asked a lot of questions there, and I'm not sure which one you want me to handle. I don't blame Governor Murphy for the pandemic. There's some decisions he made early on that I think he agrees that he would not have made under those circumstances if he knew more. But I'm not one to go out and just attack the governor during the early parts of this pandemic because knowledge, even now, is somewhat questionable. If we're going to talk about business in this state, that's a different issue. And I think going forward, the key to this state is to make sure that business has an opportunity to flourish. And you can't do that if you overregulate and you overtax and you don't understand the nature of what it takes to run a business. So I don't want to put together the pandemic with the very basic policies that I think we've failed businesses and failed the taxpayers for years. So it's hard to put those two together because I think they're very separate.
All right. So as a follow-up, let's dig into more what small businesses need now, because they are hurting, regardless of whether you agree with the handling or not of the pandemic. Small business, the backbone of our economy, is in trouble. So what specifically can we do for them to help them get back to a more healthy state?
Well, if you don't have a competitive business environment, it's very easy now to move your business or actually to move yourself. And we've lost businesses and we lost billions of dollars in income because of the overtaxing of this state. And what do I mean by overtaxing? We've never capped state spending. We've capped local spending, we've capped county spending, but somehow we allow state spending to go as high as the Democratic legislature and a Democratic governor wants to do. And here's my concern. If you send another Democrat to replace me, the Democrats already control the Senate, they already control the Assembly, and they control the governor's office. What happens when you have one party, I don't care if it's Republican or Democrat, but if you have too much of one side, it starts to go to the extreme. So I'm concerned that if you fill my seat with a Democrat, all you're doing is moving the state farther to the left. When I say to the left, I'm not just talking about liberal, I'm talking about extremism. And that's my concern. And I think when you have extreme policies that don't really respect business or the taxpayer, people leave.
Okay, thank you, Assemblyman. Jolly?
Okay. My question has to do with the environment. So the effects climate change have on weather patterns became evident in the death and destruction caused by Ida's flooding last month. Also there's been a development boom in the flood risk areas, especially those devastated by Sandy in 2012. So the Murphy administration proposes enacting new, stricter regulations governing residential construction in said flood zones and repeat flood zones. Would you support such measures? If so, or if not, what would you suggest we do to make sure that people don't suffer the devastation that they did in Ida?
Well, first, there's no question that climate change is real. I was recently endorsed by Clean Water Action, which I'm very proud of. But specifically, we need balance in that policy. We clearly need to buy the properties that are in this flood zone, and we call that blue acres. That has to be fully funded because people in Cranford who've been hurt over and over again, and they cried when we walked down the street. They've been flooded out 3 times. That's when the state needs to come in and buy those properties because they can't sell those properties. We need a balanced approach to environmental action, meaning that we have to move forward with clean and green programs, but you also have to stay somewhat competitive with your neighbors and with the other states in this country. Because if you go too quickly, we already have a bad business environment. So it's always balance. So we should never be extreme, but absolutely, my wife happens to be an environmental artist. So I have an in-house lobbyist here. So you can be assured I'll be doing the right thing.
So my follow-up is, what about the actual building restrictions that they're suggesting be put in place to stop further, or not necessarily to stop because they've said they won't stop, but to make it more, like a more strict regulations in these flood zones, especially like Ocean and Monmouth counties, where they've built like 4,500 homes since Sandy, and they were in high risk zones.
Yeah, the overdevelopment in areas that are threatened by flooding, in my judgment, make no sense. So clearly, with respect to developing in areas that are going to be more and more flood prone, I surely want balanced legislation in that regard. It's hard to talk about a specific piece of legislation unless it's in front of us, but I can tell you generally that I think the public has seen enough. They now understand how the climate has changed. They know the risk to property. And I think the legislature is ready to move forward as well. And I hope to be a leader on those issues.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's go back to fiscal issues, taxes and spending. As we continue to see more and more power borrowing, we know our children will be paying that back. Taxes continue to go up. Unemployment taxes just went up on small businesses, despite these sort of promises from the governor and the Democrats. How do we get the spending under control, Assemblyman, and really truly begin to cut taxes and actually be fiscally responsible?
Well, when we pass a budget, for a while, we weren't doing things like they call them Christmas tree items, where specially funded items were in the budget. But that last budget, $1 million went to a Newark golf course. And I raised issues about that. But more importantly, you have to cap it at the top. And that's why I said a 2% constitutional amendment on capping state spending while we get spending under control is the only thing that's going to work. Because it's easy to say yes as a legislator. It's harder to say no. So you've had yes after yes for almost 2 decades. And that's why it's so expensive. Saying no is tough. But when you start seeing expenditures like $1 million here and there, which are really pet projects, that has to stop. And I would hope the media would identify that kind of spending as well.
So as a follow-up, mentioning the budget, we heard from many sources that everyone was given 11 hours to read the budget. And really, whether that's true or not, it seems to be that there hasn't been much oversight from the Assembly or the Senate, and that Governor Murphy has really been able to do whatever he wants. How do we get that balance of power back?
That's a really good question. And that's why you need balance of power. One party rule, whether all Democrat or all Republican, is not good. So what happens is the reason we don't see the budget is because the Senate president, the speaker, and the governor get together, they do their agreement, and then they release the budget. And since there's not really enough votes to stop any bad stuff because of, in my judgment, you've got too many of one side, that's why you see excessive spending. That's why I'm so concerned. I would love to see split government. Split government is the best. Why? Because you find the middle, and 75% of the people in New Jersey are in the middle. That's what you're looking for. And you can't do it when you have just one party control. And that's why we never saw the budget.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Jolly?
Okay. So some Republicans have grown increasingly hostile to vaccine mandates, calling them government overreach. Their critics accuse Republicans of putting politics ahead of health by exploiting vaccine hesitancy to further their political goals. They point to the fact that vaccines are safe and effective, and vaccine mandates have been in effect in this country since the 1800s. Would you support vaccine mandates, say, in our schools? If not, how do you propose keeping vulnerable people and our children safe?
Well, I actually think that Governor Murphy found the middle ground. He said for employees who don't want to get vaccinated, they have to be tested every week. So if you don't want to join the movement to stop the pandemic, there's an alternative for you. And I think that's fair. I think that if you're willing, if you believe that you don't want a vaccine for whatever reason, then test, because the pandemic's real. The COVID virus is very real and very dangerous, and especially to seniors. So the reason you see seniors are very, very, very concerned because their friends have died. So we take this very seriously. And I think the compromise Governor Murphy has reached is a fair compromise.
And what does that look like for schools where parents, are fighting a vaccine mandate for their children, in spite of, let's say, the fact that there's already been schools require the MMR and other routine vaccinations?
Well, I think what those parents are arguing, or did argue, that at that point is experimental. I no longer believe it's experimental with adults. So I think it was rejected in part because it was brand new. And it's actually a new technology. It's not the way the old vaccines work. But you have to look at the common good. And the common good, if we're going to keep people healthy, that we're going to highly urge people to get the vaccine. And if you don't, then you have to go through some other testing. That's my position. Now, I don't know, I deeply believe this. There are doctors who have people who should not be vaccinated. If there's a true medical reason not to be vaccinated, those people should have that right if they've got competent medical evidence to say that it's risk to their child or to them. But I think that's a real small number of people. And I think if you get most people vaccinated, this pandemic would be over. What's amazing to me, they interviewed people who almost died, who were in hospital beds. And one mistake we're not doing, we're not having debates between the people who think the vaccine is dangerous or they don't want it and the medical community. And we need a lot more than that. And we didn't really have enough of that in Trenton. We had never had not one hearing on whether the vaccine should be taken, having experts on both sides. Most of the time, I can't find an expert against it.
Thank you.
Okay. Last question. I'm going back to money again. It's the theme with me today.
Sure.
Property taxes. What could be more important than in New Jersey than property taxes? A major problem, highest in the nation. Everyone keeps promising, both parties, they're going to fix this issue. You want to be in the Senate. What's the fix? How do we finally get this under control?
Well, look what Florida did, and I put that bill in. It's called a Homestead Act. That Homestead Act basically says when you own a property, you have a limited increase in your property tax. And then when the new buyer comes in, the new buyer who now knows what the increase is going to be, pays market value in property taxes. The system is incredibly well designed for senior citizens and people who are getting older. Why we haven't implemented a system where the new buyers pay market value, but the older owners have a stable property tax system, I don't know. Can't answer that because I don't control which bills get posted, but I love the bill and I love the idea. And of course, I go back to, unless we cap state spending, let me tell you, if you cap state spending, we will find a way to fund what's necessary. But if you continue to raise income tax, property taxes, corporate taxes, and sales taxes, you just drive people out and you don't solve any of these problems that are causing New Jersey to be so expensive.
One more question with that. Jack Ciattarelli has talked about funding for schools and changing that formula to help with property taxes equality, if you will. How do you feel about that? And do you think that's a fair solution?
Well, certainly there's certain communities done really well. And I think Jack talks about Jersey City. You have to look at some of these cities that are well represented, but have done really well economically and say, wait a minute now, why are we sending so much state aid to certain places that have grown economically for many years and they continue to receive significant state supplemental aid? So, we clearly, and this is political, they've got good representation in certain places like Hudson County, so they get a little bit more money than I think they really need. And I think even the Democrats behind closed doors might tell you that, but they can't fight because of the power of the representatives from that area.
Okay, thank you, Assemblyman. So that was our 6 questions with a few follow-ups. If you would please close for us just about 2 minutes or so to the constituents and tell them why you believe you should be serving in the Senate.
The number one issue is I feel compelled when someone calls me to solve their problems. I don't believe in Big government or big bullies. I don't care if it's an insurance company or I don't care if it's a state government not returning your calls. When you call me, I'm going to fight regardless of who's on the other side. And what I have learned during my tenure in the legislature is I know who to call and I know how to fix it, and they don't want to mess with me. So when someone calls me and their insurance company's not paying their medical bill, you better not be on the other end of that insurance company when I call them. When someone calls motor vehicles and they're being rude or they're not responding, I'll physically go down to motor vehicles and let them be rude to me. I don't take any nonsense from any entity. I'm not owned by any entity. I don't have a political boss. As far as I'm concerned, you call me, I'm there as your constituent liaison to solve your problem. And that's what I think I bring to the table. I'm going to continue to fight, regardless of who threatens me and who doesn't want me in office. And just so you know, big insurance companies, or should I say insurance interests, are spending a lot of money so I don't go back down there and help the consumer. They don't care for me. And to be honest with you, probably for good reason.
All right. Thank you, Assemblyman. Thank you, Jolly. To everyone listening, please share this, especially if you're in District 21. Please share this. And most importantly, vote. The early voting starts October 23rd. It's new for New Jersey this year. Make sure you go to your county website to find out where those locations are. If you don't early vote, then go on November 2nd to your polling location. But none of this means anything unless you guys show up and vote. Once again, thank you, Assemblyman. We appreciate it. Jolly, thank you. And to our audience, we'll see you next week.
Thank you so much.